Hello, my name is Brian Woods. I'm the owner of a company in Indianapolis, Indiana called Material Handling Solutions. We buy and sell and install pallet racking and conveyors, anything in the big warehouses. And we also do fabrication if you have any metal fabrication you want done. Today I'm doing this presentation on Rack 101. When you are designing a system for your warehouse, you need to know a few basic things in order to get your manufacturer or your supplier the know-how on what they need to look for. Well, number one thing would be your uprights. The uprights are your depth, or verticals. You need to know your depth and your height. And typically, the uprights that I see are 42 inches deep, because a standard pallet, a standard wooden pallet, is 40 by 48 inches. And the height of it is based on the product that you have and the capacity, how much weight you're going to have to carry. A lot of people think because my pallet's 48 inches, I need a 48-inch upright. That isn't the case. You really need a 42. That way you can overhang it and you make sure your weight's on the beam, not on the deck, and you don't have point loading. Point loading is a very bad thing that you could have if you're laying certain materials up on a wire deck and you have a point load in one area. It's only good for so much weight per point load area. But so you have an upright, and then the beam is the length and the height of the beam. If you have some existing rack in your warehouse, you want to match it up. That's an important thing to know. Picture of the connection and on the beam is important too, if you're wanting to let your supplier know what you're looking for. Then the third thing would be wire decking or pallet supports. And on this system, on most rack systems, the roll form beams are going to have steps in them, front and back steps. And the wire deck has 3 channels, and all the mesh is tech welded on. There's 3 of these channels sitting on the step. So the weight capacity typically is around 2,500 pounds. Or you could go with something that could save you about half the cost on the wire deck, is using 2 pallet supports. They're not as, they're not as safe. There's not going to keep anything from falling on down through the rack. So the wire deck is a preferred method on most applications. One thing you got to remember in Rack 101 is how tall is your ceiling. You got to let everybody know. Let your supplier know, because in Indianapolis you got to go. You can't be 18 inches off from your sprinkler system or from your roof with your product. So your product height is the most. That's going to give us the spacing on your upright. So there's many considerations when you're looking at maximizing the use of your warehouse space, because space isn't cheap. Space is expensive, so let's go up with it, right? You go up all the way to these newer buildings have 40-foot ceilings. They're going to run their rack up to 30-foot high. Then you're going to be different at beam elevations, but typically a building will be somewhere around 16 to 20 foot tall. What size, how high will your forklift reach? Some people don't get that information and design it according to the building height, but it needs to be basically controlling factor would be the forklift itself. Now the uprights, you can get those in any type depth you want. They have different size columns. They're always typically 3 inches wide in the face. The front to back is going to be either 3 inches or 1 5/8, and each one of them will give a capacity, will lower the capacity on 1 5/8 on a 4-foot beam elevation, and let's say 16-foot tall, and you have 3 beam elevations on a 16-foot tall upright. Then you're going to figure out the capacity. Typical capacity on an upright would be around 24,000 pounds between 2 uprights. So you weigh your material all the way up on those 3 beam levels, and you figure out that's your maximum you can go. Now that's on a 3 by 3, on a 3 by 1 5/8. Deep one is going to be more around 18,000 pounds. One of the things for sure that you got to look at is how much weight and what size pallets you're going to be putting up in the system. Typically they try to keep each beam level at the same elevation. So if you're looking like at a 12 foot, that's a 12-foot beam there. You're looking at different capacities based on the height of the beam. So your capacity on each pallet position will be different. So if you're ever buying rack, the number one thing you got to consider is the capacity. How much can we store in the allotted area that you have? Indianapolis is a low seismic zoned area. We're fortunate. We don't get a lot of earthquakes here, but in California and Texas, some of the other areas, they do, and what they do is they increase the thickness gauge of the upright, or they may weld horizontals or back reinforcements on the back side of the upright columns on both sides, or maybe just one side. They can go up all the way if they need to. The other thing, in this case, we got the smallest foot plate you've ever seen. I think the smallest one they make. It's like a 4-inch by 4-inch, and it's only 18. It's only like a 1/8 inch thickness. But I don't know. In California, well, does this one look any? Does that one look any different to you? That's a foot plate also that may be used in a seismic or in a heavy zoned area. Indiana, if your product is above 12 feet tall, or if you're moving into a new building, they're going to want to see a permit. And a permit requires a structural engineer to look at your product along with your layout to make sure that everyone's safe. If you're in California, some other heavier seismic zoned areas, that requirement may be different. It will be different. Typically it's going to be the product's just going to have to be beefier, but it's still going to have to be permitted, and it needs to be done by a structural engineer. Now, the other thing that we want to go over today with you is the different styles of rack, and that particular style is called teardrop. This is the teardrop, shaped like a teardrop, and the buttons on the beams are perfectly round. Interlake was selling 80% of the rack in the market, and their patent ran out. Well, all the other manufacturers, which are maybe 7 or 8 other manufacturers, started making the teardrop style uprights. So Interlake decided to start another teardrop, which they called the new style teardrop. And the new style teardrop is an upright that looks like this one. And this one here is kind of an upside down house looking thing that you could put your beam in, and it would fit the slotted beam. So their beams, instead of being perfectly round, their buttons, they came out with a slotted beam on the backside, so it fit in here and fit on both sides. This beam right here is a new style beam, and it'll fit both sides. But what happened was the manufacturer's customers got upset because they were the manufacturer's customers had their existing beams that wouldn't fit in the new style uprights. So you got to be careful about that. If you've got the old style perfectly round teardrop buttons and the beams, that'll fit only the new old style. So they did this for about 5 years, and they quit manufacturing it and went back to the old style, but they kept the new style buttons on the beams. Let me show you the buttons on the beams on the new style. This was a manufacturer that actually did do that. They had their own design for pallet rack, and when the patent ran out, they started making teardrop also. But they have the uprights like the first one I showed you, but they made all their pins, instead of perfectly round, they're oblong, so they could fit in either one of those uprights. You have different style uprights besides the teardrop. There's other manufacturers, and they're still out there. There's a lot, probably about 15 different styles out, but the ones in this market I see the most of are going to be the teardrop. But you also you see some of it, a little bit of what they call keystone or Pinco or T-bolt or structural. Structural is used mostly in the food industry, where there's going to be a lot of moisture in the refrigerated areas, or what's nice about it, these are roll forward, so they're rolled all the way around. So moisture can get inside there and start rusting out the interior of the upright or the beam. And With the structural rack, that's open. It's like a C channel. Boom, boom, open up, so it'll never hold moisture and won't allow it to rust. The other types of pallet racking that we've talked about besides teardrop is Penco, speed rack, T-bolt, ridge rack. They all have the same application, the same kind of usage as teardrop to hold pallets. The only exception would be the structural rack and the application that it's being used in. We also have a lot of column protectors and guardrail, and this right here is the end of the aisle protectors. They'll keep the forklifts from damaging the uprights, and then we have bollards here and some more different guardrail, and the whole rack system set up for that. Hey, and that's Rack 101. We thank you for your time, and if you're ever in the Indianapolis market or Indiana market, feel free to give us a call if we can help you out, and surrounding states also. We're here to help. Please feel free to call.